Oh boy. Oh boy. Woo! Oh boy. Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, People's Pundit. And if you like the videos, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it far and wide. Smash the like button, as Tim says. All right. Look, yeah, we're gonna spend most of the show talking about what happened yesterday. The first time in American history, a motion to vacate the Speaker of the House passed. And the lower chamber ousted the speaker, in this case Kevin McCarthy, who I believe is the shortest serving speaker in history. Made history, if you remember, needing 15 rounds of votes to secure enough votes to get the gavel in the first place. And then, of course, that led him, in order to do that, he needed to give concessions. Look, so we're going to talk a little bit about the historic nature of this, but we're also going to talk about how, even though Kevin McCarthy was the shortest reigning speaker and maybe would not be in the future, we'll see if this continues. Regardless, this was still a long road to oust him. And I'm not talking about from the time he got the gavel to the time he was stripped of the gavel. These 8 people who voted to oust Kevin McCarthy, whether you think it was smart, whether you think it was wise, they have an end game here, whether you think it's going to hurt the Republican Party or not, listen, everyone's talking about that. And I went on Sean Parnell last night and I agreed. It's probably true. You're going to see a bump for Democrats in the generic ballot. At least I wouldn't be surprised. But it is also true that Donald Trump's lead over Joe Biden in 2024 is twice as large as the Republican lead over Democrats in the generic ballot for 2024. There is a reason for that. What is not being talked about is that this was a long road of a lack of representation, of a party repeatedly lying to their voters every damn cycle, telling them they're going to do things like repeal and replace Obamacare, telling them they're going to secure the southern border, telling them they're going to be fiscally responsible, telling them they're going to put Americans before Ukrainians, telling them they're not going to waste stupid decisions, waste blood and treasure that we simply don't have anymore, telling them that they're going to be the conservative party with conservative answers. Can we get real for a second and admit one of the main reasons that the Republican conference in the upper and lower house hates Donald Trump, and always has, is because Donald Trump did things that he said he was going to do. And the old Rush Limbaugh, the late great Rush Limbaugh, made that point perfectly clear almost every week on his channel before he passed in the era of Donald Trump. He had done nothing but watch Dennis Hastert. I mean, we can go back a long time. Even Newt Gingrich in the 90s failed to deliver on big promises that he said he would get. Well, it was in the contract with America that got them the House for the first time in decades in the Republican Revolution of 94. Paul Ryan and the Young Guns. After 2016, Paul Ryan said, Donald Trump heard a voice that none of us could hear. And I applaud him from that, and I want them to know that I hear you now too. Sat right in front of Sean Hannity, not 5 feet away, in a chair right across from him. Oh, we got a consensus plan to repeal and replace Obamacare. Absolutely, Sean. Absolutely. Of course we do. They did not. The border remains open so Paul Ryan can have immigrants wash his laundry for cheap. So Kevin McCarthy can have immigrants cut his lawn on the cheap. Draw your attention there to the man in the middle. His name is Eric Cantor. He was a majority whip. He was the whip. Him, Paul Ryan, and Kevin McCarthy on the front page, a new generation of conservative leaders. Young Guns. Kevin McCarthy even had a pack for it, basically, or a group. If he liked you, you would get put, if you were running for Congress and he liked you, which was tantamount to agreeing to bend over for Kevin McCarthy. If you agreed to bend over for Kevin McCarthy, you would get put on the Young Guns list and they would come and help you against insurgent candidates that actually intended to keep their promise to voters. David Giglio sailing to the nomination in California 13. Duarte comes in, he's not rich, but wealthy enough, gives his own money to qualify, has his family, loans his family money to give to the campaign to qualify to make it to Young Guns. Kevin McCarthy swoops in, spends millions, and annihilates him. Mike Cassidy forces Mike Guest into a runoff in Mississippi 3. Kevin McCarthy decides it's a wise waste of millions of dollars to destroy Mike Cassidy. These three came up with this together. What was the agenda? Keep out the real conservatives. Keep out the populists. Keep out the lawmakers in our caucus. We don't want people in our conference that intend to keep their promises. And I'm not blaming everything on Kevin McCarthy here. The truth is, folks, Kevin McCarthy was sacrificed, as he told the conference on the way out the door yesterday. They're all like this. Almost all of them are. Look, again, we'll go back and we'll talk about the 8 people, but the man in the middle, Eric Cantor, was defeated by Dave Bratt in Virginia 7. Over what issue? What issue caused? If I remember, a school teacher to come in and oust the next Speaker of the House in a primary? It was immigration. Eric Cantor's repeated lies and repeated failures to bring true border security to the forefront, to force the president to enforce the law. We don't need any more laws. We need the president to enforce them. We need the bureaucracy to do their jobs. We didn't need shows, which is all the Republican conference is ever good at. Putting on a show. Let's send out some mean tweets. Let's put together another useless committee. All the while, we can be nice and lose. Lose one battle after the other until there are no more battles left to fight. The so-called conservative party has had the Congress more years than not since George W. Bush took the presidency. They have done nothing but waste money, spend it like drunken sailors, blow holes in the budget, add trillions to the national debt, deficit spending like crazy. And fine, you want to argue COVID, which I was deeply disappointed in Donald Trump for that bill, the CARES Act. But fine, you want to argue it was unprecedented timing and it had to be done. Fine. Did these scumbags have to keep spending levels at COVID levels? They took advantage. Because the truth is, they are run by the lobbyists. They have lied to their voters time and again, day in and day out. And they have cost the party its identity. And for that, they are all gone. For their role, every single one of those men on that cover of that magazine are now gone. Kevin McCarthy will not run for Speaker again. Paul Ryan is a pariah. The base hates him. He's a Murdoch bitch. And Eric Cantor doesn't even exist anymore. He's in the further. Laura liked that one. He's in the further gone, and the rest of them are about to join them. So while I stipulate that, there's no exit strategy here, does it make Republicans look bad? Yeah. Republicans should be united fighting against their real enemy, but here's the kicker. You know what? Before we even do that, let me play this. This is the single most powerful moment of yesterday. And despite what the Hugh Hewitts of the world say, the Eric Ericksons of the world say, even the Newt Gingriches of the world, the Dana Lashes, the Ben Dominics, these are professional losers. What will be taken away from yesterday is the optics of this clip. And I had a lot of stuff that I wanted to load up, and it's giving me a hard time. So we're just going to go ahead, and that's okay because we can more easily stop and interject in this format. So this clip will be the clip that people remember. Let's roll it.
And when it comes to how those raise money, I take no lecture on asking patriotic Americans to weigh in and contribute to this fight from those who would grovel and bend knee for the lobbyists and special interests who own our leadership, who have, boo all you want, who have hollowed out this town and have borrowed against the future of our future generations. I'll be happy to fund my political operation through the work of hardworking Americans, $10 and $20 and $30 at a time, and you all keep showing up at the lobbyist fundraisers and see how that goes for you.
Woo! And then later, by the way, couldn't have been more appropriate. And I could care less about ever getting on this woman's show, so I will just be brutally honest about her because I can't stand her. I think she's one of the biggest frauds in conservative media. All right. He goes appropriately on Laura Ingraham later that night, and she's just, browbeating him and he handled her like a champ. He handled her. But it's a perfect example. It just goes to show you this is a woman who cheerleaded for the Bushes, for the New York Times, told the party after she supposedly supported Donald Trump, actually even before that, told the party because Kevin McCarthy was rejected the first time. Can we not forget for a second this man's rise to power? He was rejected after John Boehner left. Why? Why? It's not only that the base doesn't trust him. People don't trust him in the conference. We'll go from top left to right, and then from bottom left to right, and we will discuss it. Top left, Andy Biggs, Arizona. It doesn't get any more patriotic than Andy Biggs. Doesn't get any more MAGA than Andy Biggs. As best as you can be in a disgusting institution like the U.S. House of Representatives. For obvious reasons, Andy Biggs voted in favor of the motion to vacate the speaker. That idiot to his right is Ken Buck, Colorado. He is, I don't know, on meth maybe or something. He's in one reality one day and one reality the next day. He is auditioning for a role on CNN. I really couldn't care less about him, honestly. To the right, I mean, I can't tell you what's in his head because I don't know him. I don't think anybody can know somebody as bipolar as Buck. He's just all over the place. To the right of that is Tim. We're going to play a clip from Tim in a second. Tim Burchett, who represents the people of Tennessee. Not the people in the halls of Congress. To the right of that, you get also, as MAGA as they come, Eli Crane. Part of the original, as several of them are, who wanted concessions because they did not trust Kevin McCarthy. Eli Crane, how much did he receive from Kevin McCarthy to help him win his seat in 2022? Are you ready? Are you ready? $5,000. That's it. Bottom left is the man who led it all, Matt Gaetz, Florida House 1. We're going to play a clip from somebody else, too, who just says the most ridiculous things in the world and backed up by several in Big Con. And this is the thing we're going to talk about. Is that, yes, we have to appreciate the historic nature of the event. And yes, I stipulate about all the so-called, the chaos. I stipulate all that. But I will not continue to talk only about that if you and the rest of the Big Con do not acknowledge that you are incapable of learning your lessons, and that is why we are here today. What was their reaction? Let's primary him. Full disclosure, I have polled Florida House District 1 many, many, many times, and I've polled it about Matt Gaetz many, 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 many times. I have polled it for Matt Gaetz one time. Full disclosure. I freaking dare you to try to primary this guy. You will get your ass kicked all over the panhandle so badly, you won't want to step foot in the Sunshine State ever again. The people of that first congressional district in Florida are 100% behind Matt Gaetz. Knock yourself out. The guy wins 2/3 of the vote for a reason. After they accuse him of sex trafficking. After they accuse him of illicit drug use and all sorts of stuff. They were able to knock, are you ready, Laura? They were able to knock a full 2 points off his margin. So you want to waste your donor money on trying to go after Matt Gaetz instead of listening to what he has to say? Do you, fool? Do you? Bob Good, again, to the Matt, right? The bottom line with Bob Good is very simple. Kevin McCarthy's a liar. You can't trust what Kevin McCarthy says. To the right, South Carolina, Nancy Mace. And that was the gasp. You could hear an audible gasp in the chamber when Nancy Mace voted yay. Nancy, I love you more and more every day. I'll be honest with you. I'm not kidding. This is a woman who had to fend off a primary challenge from MAGA, and she did. By the way, grand total, $30,000 from Kevin McCarthy to help her. So people are like, oh, give all these people money. He's never given Matt Gaetz a dime. Not that Matt would ever take it, because Matt is the only person in Congress who does not take money from super PACs. He is a crowd-funded congressman. That's the truth. So you can say what you want about him, but he's the only one, left or right, who crowdfunds his representation in Congress. His ability to represent the people of the first district in Congress. From what I understand, it came down to this. And I know Kevin McCarthy made a statement at the presser, which he should not have done. He should have just shut up after the first 2 minutes and he would have went out with class. But of course, they didn't. They don't know how to do that. So he just decided to lean into Mace after leaning in everybody else. Her chief of staff said that we kept all our promises. Why did you call her chief of staff? You have to listen between the lines, folks, when you're listening to these filthy snakes. You have to listen to what they're really saying when they open their mouths. Why did you call Nancy Mace's assistant? First of all, Nancy, you should fire that person. They're obviously talking behind your back. They're obviously undermining you. You should get rid of them. Because her version of the story is very different. He has promised things, but you know what's funny? It's like everyone's lying, but they all have the same story. It's just a different bill. He promised me he'd do this. It never happened. He promised me he'd support this bill. It never happened. Where's our term limit bill? Tim Burchett simply said during the phone call yesterday, Kevin, where is the term limit bill? There are things that I told you were important to me, and I would be with you if this is the case. They are friends. McCarthy and Burchett are friends, have been for years. Where's the term limit bill? Nothing. And then some people are disputing whether or not they believe what his version of the events. But basically what Burchett was saying was that he's like, listen, I just want to pray on this thing. And Kevin McCarthy basically said something to the effect of, you need to ask God to support your friend, for permission to support your friend. And that is when Tim Burchett said, all right. He wouldn't have said it like this, but the People's Pundit will. Go yourself, and I'm out. He tried to keep it, from what I understand, civil, and asked him about like 3 pieces of legislation that it's always someone else's fault with Kevin. We couldn't do this because of so-and-so. It's the Democrats. It's this, it's that. So I'm not going to, here, I'm going to play the clip from Newt Gingrich. And then I want you to, we'll talk about why what Newt says is ridiculous, aside from the fact that you cannot primary Matt Gaetz. Newt, I dare you. I dare you. I triple dog dare you. All right. Sorry, Matt. I know you don't want to waste your money on a primary challenge, but I'm making my point, really. You will get eviscerated in a primary against Matt Gaetz. Let's rock.
96% of the Republicans voted for McCarthy. 4% voted against him. From my position as a longtime Republican activist, they're traitors. All 8 of them should, in fact, be primaried. They should all be driven out of public life. What they did was to go to the other team to cause total chaos. We ought to be focusing on Biden. We ought to be focusing on the economy. We ought to be focusing on the border. Instead, you're going to get a week or 10 days of the media focusing on Republican disarray. It's an astonishingly destructive behavior by a handful of egocentric people who think they're superior to 96% of the conference.
I object to this framing of the debate that Matt Gaetz and the others are grandstanding, are egocentric. As Newt Gingrich knows damn well, all elected members of Congress, all presidential candidates and presidents are egomaniacs. I'm sorry, it's just the psychology of leadership. It's the way it's been for many, many years of human civilization. It will continue to be that way. On the topic of whether they're traitors, it's kind of funny. Newt Gingrich is a speaker, right? So you notice people who want to protect the institution, right, of the speakership, care more about that, are willing to talk about people who disagree or oppose those people in that way, much the same way that Newt would refuse to really go after Nancy Pelosi on, he would never go after them. He would never go in after Nancy Pelosi personally, the way he just went after Nancy Mace and Tim Burchett and Matt Gaetz and Eli Crane and Bob Good, right? And down the line. Again, I'm not going to defend Buck. I'm just not. The man is delusional. I don't know what's going on with him. That is because Newt is in the club. He's in the special club. I've been a speaker. Just like presidents have their special club and vice presidents have their special club. And they're all together in the big old club that is DC, that never listens to anybody and then has an absolute canary when they revolt. Here's the real irony. Nancy Pelosi attending services for Dianne Feinstein. She could have cast a proxy vote. She didn't vote. That's funny, isn't it? If it's so reckless and dangerous and such a bad precedent, and you care so much about the institution, why did you not vote by proxy? This morning, Republicans are storming all over the place. They're going to have a Congress is out for a week. They're going to have a conference on Tuesday, and then whole talks about speakerships on Wednesday. On all votes, potentially even. Not potentially, they will. People are being put forward. I've heard a lot about Byron Donalds. I actually do think that Nancy Mace is a good candidate to be speaker. But there are several. Jim Jordan, obviously, is one that's always floated around. He wanted nothing to do with it. He became, let's be honest, he became more of a McCarthy acolyte. And you'll never hear this in mainstream media. So I'm just going to tell you, Jim Jordan's seat was about to be redistricted out of existence. The story is Kevin McCarthy made some phone calls, had some people make some phone calls. Jim Jordan's seat was preserved. And then Jim Jordan did a 180, leaving people scratching their heads on certain things. When Jim Jordan had Mark Zuckerberg by the short and curlies, he did not drop or press him about election interference between 2020, and he had the goods to do it. We had a show hearing with a bunch of old white men who don't understand technology attempting to put on a show and throw red meat to their base. It was disgraceful. When Jim Jordan had whistleblowers and documents proving that Mark Zuckerberg was interfering with the election, he did Nothing. Nothing. Bet you didn't hear that from Sean Hannity. So he didn't want it. And now they're all sitting around throwing a temper tantrum, sending Nancy Pelosi, sending Steny Hoyer eviction notices. Immediately, Frank yesterday, from Quite Frankly, he's like, dude, what the hell was she even still doing in that office? Well, that would be because Republicans are cowards. They're now taking revenge. The word is revenge. That's the word that everyone's even saying. Revenge on Democrats, especially the leadership, for allowing 8 traitors, according to Newt Gingrich, to oust McCarthy as Speaker. Why does this matter? These idiots just found out the hard way what their base, who they hate, has known for years. Your friends across the aisle aren't your damn friends. They're not only your enemies, they are literally the enemies of the people who vote your asses in office. People are being executed in the streets on the way to church. People who pull fire alarms, who don't happen to be Democratic congressmen, get things like 15 years for interrupting official congressional proceedings. You just found out the hard way what all those people already knew. You don't have any friends with the D after their name. You just thought you did. They played you for fools. You're cucks. You're all a bunch of cucks. A conference of cucks. You just found out that they're really your enemy. And what do enemies do? They smile to your face and slit your proverbial throat the first chance they get. And that's what they did. And you're wagging your little tail like a puppy who's been kicked. It's pathetic. You want to see this mentality in full display, folks? You should rewind the clock. Go back and watch Jeff Sessions being confirmed for the Attorney General of the United States. This idiot continuously calls them my friends across the aisle, while they accuse him of every unethical doings you could possibly cite to disqualify somebody to be Attorney General. While he smiles like an idiot, like it's theater. Like they're not destroying your reputation forever, you moron. These are people who accuse a man, whether you like him or not, couldn't be in better standing in the community that surrounds that cesspool, has faithfully served on the District Court of Appeals for years. They accuse a man like that with a family, a beautiful family, of being a serial gang rapist to keep him off the Supreme Court. Those are your friends. And Republicans, you are in a politically unsustainable position. You have been in one forever. You just refuse to see it. No party can continue the grift that you have been engaged in against your voters. No party can have a constituency if they don't represent them. All my years of polling, it has never been the case that I've polled congressional leaders in Congress and it didn't turn out this way. Generally, everyone's unpopular, some more than others. But the Democratic leaders, Schumer, Pelosi, and now Hakeem Jeffries, they're disliked by Republicans and they're disliked by independents. And in case of Pelosi and Schumer, is a lot of independents. Especially Pelosi was terribly, terribly unpopular with independents. But not with Democrats. Nope. Democrats feel represented. When you ask voters, do you have a more favorable or unfavorable opinion about each party? Democrats now, they're falling now, but for years, more years than not in my career as a pollster, the Democratic Party had a more favorable approval. Why? Because they had their own base saying, yes, I have a favorable opinion of the Democratic Party. I feel they represent my views. That has never been the case with Republicans. They hate their own leaders. And I see all the rhinos putting up polls about Kevin McCarthy's favorability rating. You guys see it. We've tracked it for a long time. Public Polling Project, too. It's on the front of Big Data Poll right now. Kevin McCarthy is not as unliked as John Boehner was or Paul Ryan was. But he wasn't liked. The more people got to know him, the less they liked him. He got a simple boost for a short period of time because Republicans were pleasantly surprised with how he was performing his job in the early days of his speakership. He got a bump. But generally speaking, when it comes to Mitch McConnell, his little mentor or mentee, John Thune and others, they are not liked because their own voters don't like them. Mitch McConnell, for instance, had a higher, very favorable rating among Democrats than he did Republicans in 5 of the last 6 national polls in which we asked about his favorability rating. In the one where he did not, Republicans were very favorable 9%, and Democrats were very favorable 8%. Not a big change. Actually, you could call it statistical noise. Why is it that Republicans feel this way about their leaders? Are they irrational? No. Folks, it doesn't matter if it's your political leaders, a representative, a one-time best friend, neighbors, people you go to school with, people you go to work with. It's human nature. If someone stabs you in the back and repeatedly lies to you and betrays you, you tend to dislike that SOB. This is human nature. Republicans have not represented their voters for a very, very, very long time. They had one president who did and tried. They've had nothing but disappointments for the remainder of the last, well, let's just call it the 21st century. Even before that, the betrayal by the Bush wing of the party led to 20% voting, almost 20%, for Ross Perot. Fractured the party for a decade. Why? They got a little bit too used to Reaganism. And by the way, Michael Reagan, the most destructive thing that anyone's ever done to that party was your father's amnesty. I saw your tweet yesterday. Scrambling to be relevant again. Why don't you go pep talk your liberal crazy brother who's a nutcase? We're all supposed to what? Envy Ronald Reagan? Ronald Reagan passed gun control, raised taxes, and opened the border because he got duped also like a cuck by Democrats lying to him about shutting the border down in exchange for something they wanted. Instead, they rolled Ronald Reagan. It's true. Most of the Reagan myth is just that, folks. It's a damn myth. And if we fast forward to today, I wonder if Ronald Reagan was still around, what he would say about his failure on these issues. He already said in one of his last public lucid thoughts about policy that the amnesty bill that he agreed to was one of the biggest mistakes of his presidency. Well, look at where we are now. He gave large swaths of the country over to the cartels who have corrupted our leaders. And now use our citizens for freaking target practice. And they just don't get it. Here's a loser who's been around for a really, really, really long time. And I'm sorry, but I have absolutely zero respect for these losers. Absolutely zero. Not a little, not some, none. I have no respect for people like you, Hewitt, and Ben Dominic, and Ben Shapiro, and anybody else who's over there and bitching and moaning about what happened here. I don't think it's smart either. I don't think it's wise to be fighting, at each other's throats. A house divided cannot stand, folks. Bottom line, a house divided cannot stand. But here's the kicker. Here's what they don't want to acknowledge. The house has been divided. That's why it's not standing. You heard Newt Gingrich say 96% of the caucus. Matt Gaetz doesn't represent the caucus. Nancy, he represents Florida's 1st congressional district. Newt, or have you forgotten how this works? Nancy Mace doesn't represent the caucus. She represents the people of South Carolina, including people of Charleston, who wanted him gone. You wouldn't be in this position if you represented your voters, to include your leadership. Of course he is in breach of the contract, of the deal that he made to even get the gavel. It's worse than that. There's a distrust that they forged by lying to members like they lied to their voters. Listen to this idiot's statement. Memo to House GOP. Oh, the great Hugh Hewitt is about to give advice. Everybody listen. Memo from Hugh Hewitt, who supported Mitt Romney. Memo from Hugh Hewitt, who cheerleaded for John McCain. The genius is about to speak. You gotta be friggin' kidding me here. Name Speaker McCarthy Speaker Emeritus. Yeah, okay. That would be wise. I mean, that first statement alone is stupid. The House just voted to vacate the speakership. And your suggestion is to ignore them? So you just don't believe in representative government at all, right? Folks, I guess the old brand of conservatism has nothing to do with self-governance. I would call it the fake brand of conservatism, but the big con, as it is, keep everything the same, he says. Again, historic event, whether you support it or you oppose it. You have got to acknowledge that what happened is history. History. More than 100 years ago. Connie, he was a Republican from Illinois. Or Gurney, excuse me. He dared the House. You don't like me? Vote to vacate. I dare you. And he did. He dared them. They took up that dare. He won. The motion to vacate failed. This is the first time in the history of our republic that the House of Representatives voted to vacate the Speaker. And the stupid simpletons in the ruling class think that this is a good idea. Look at the first two suggestions. In a memo from the smart guy, name Speaker McCarthy, Speaker Emeritus, keep everything the same, and here's the kicker. Expel the 8 from the caucus. Recruit primary challengers to them all. Be a party that isn't controlled by its knuckleheads. First, expel the 8 from the caucus and you lose your majority. So everything you stupid idiot, you have been bitching about for a week, you're going to lose the investigations into Biden. You're going to lose control of this committee, that committee. This isn't going to get done. That's not going to get done. You're not going to cut your 8% cut, which is a joke anyway. Chip Soy's a proposal to cut 8% is ridiculous. And by the way, the appropriation bill that was the cuts in the appropriations agriculture, excuse me, that was going through the appropriations process, it failed to pass anyway. Republicans like Hewitt and the people that represent him worked with Democrats to defeat it. They weren't getting that anyway. But he's illogical, is my point. You understand what I'm saying? He spends all this time that basically attacking Matt Gaetz and others, saying that you can't do it because it doesn't make sense to do, because then you're going to lose all this, that, the other thing. If you expel those 8 from the caucus, you lose your majority, you stupid idiot. Recruit primary challengers to them all. Again, good luck. Tim Burchett absolutely has no chance of being ousted. Ken Buck, maybe. I think the base doesn't like him, so it's quite possible. Andy Biggs, you have no chance. There was just this issue with Andy Biggs with an independent running in his district. A lot of people thought it was closer than it should have been because of that. Matt Rosendale, I mean, he has been no lamb on this topic, folks. He ran for Montana's at large. He told the people of Montana what he was going to do. Eli Crane ran on opposing McCarthy and voting to impeach, remove him if necessary. Not even supporting him, actually, in fact, as speaker. Nancy Mace, they tried to run MAGA against her, and she won. She eked it out. So she's sitting right in that pretty place between MAGA enough, but not so MAGA I scare Charleston, or I scare the rhinos in Charleston. So she's sitting right in a great area. Bob Good, you're going to primary Bob Good. Good luck with that. And we've already been over Matt Gaetz. So these people are just making these stupid comments that have absolutely zero chance of coming to fruition. Recruit primary challengers, he says. Here's another big irony of all of this. Because they are everything I just accused them of being. Sellouts to special interest, sellouts to lobbyists on K Street, betrayers of their own voters. They already tried this plan. They did sabotage David Giglio. They did sabotage Mike Cassidy. They did sabotage Joe Kent. They did sabotage J.R. Majewski. They did sabotage John Gibbs. And I could just keep going down the line, because there are loads more. Mitch McConnell did the same thing in the Senate. Why? They don't want to find themselves in this kind of a position. What position is that? Being exposed as a fraud, as a liar who represents special interest over their own constituents. Someone who runs on being a super conservative fighter for border security. Take John Duarte out in California 13, $2.5 million to defeat David Giglio. What a friggin' fraud. So they did everything they could to prevent MAGA from being a big majority. Folks, they could easily have 240 seats. They were headed for a landslide. But between the sabotage and the refusal to acknowledge that you are way behind in a game that you don't even know you're playing anymore. And of course, I'm referring to ballot harvesting and vote registration and, get out the vote operations that are new age things, so complex, nobody even understands, but a handful of us who have actually studied what Democrats have done and have the tools, the software, the know-how as well, the experience to implement what they did. They were clueless. They didn't want to have that conversation because there wasn't enough money to go around. It's either sabotage MAGA so I can protect my gavel, or put the money into the war chest for vote harvesting and get out the vote. It's going on right now. $100 million in the first quarter spent to defeat Donald Trump. They want to have that conversation. They do not want to have the conversation. It's easier to blame Trump for 2020 and MAGA for 2020. It's hard to talk about things, A, that don't make you look good, don't put you in a favorable light, and B, you don't really understand. Great article, by the way, professor in University of Buffalo and Real Clear Politics about what the hell happened in 2022. Coupled that with the sabotage, and that is why Republicans did not take back the U.S. Senate, and that is why Republicans ended up with a tiny majority. One, they cannot expel 8 members and keep. Special elections, remember? So this is what Hewitt suggests. He suggests doing more of the same. He suggests ignoring the most historic event in the U.S. House of Representatives ever, because it is. He's suggesting everybody ignores that and goes back to more of the same. I can't imagine why his Republican Party has been the party of failure for 3 decades. Maybe because he's an idiot who doesn't understand the time he's in. This guy. Mark Levin quote tweeted, "Good point, Senator." Then he had to go because he had to hawk his book. I had to listen to an interview with him the other day with a friend who's trying to ask him serious questions. Every single answer Mark Levin had to the question about elections and the direction of the Republican Party, the direction of the country, if it couldn't be directly linked to his new book, then he ignored it altogether and just talked about his book. He offered no real analysis to any of the questions my friend posed to him during the interview. Nothing. You know, that's a really good question, and it reminds me of chapter 3 and why you should buy my new book. Next question. You know, that's a good point you bring up, and it also reminds me of chapter 5, and that's why you should buy my new book. Let me tell you a little bit what it says. How effective. Maryland, Matt Rosendale. I looked. Did Tom Cotton say anything about Gavin Newsom appointing someone who lives by D.C. to serve as senator from California? Nope. Maryland, Matt Rosendale, who opposes unlimited funding to Ukraine without audits, who opposes money laundering and forever war. Folks, can anybody tell me where the military-industrial complex rich oligarchs live? If they don't live in Northern Virginia, where do they live? Right. But he calls him Maryland, Matt Rosendale anyway. Prays for Democrats to win elections? Did God answer his prayers in 2018 when John Tester humiliated him? 2 points is a humiliation. John Tester is one of the strongest Democrats in red states to ever in the last 2 decades be from and representing a red state. It's hardly humiliation to lose to him by 2 points, especially when Tom Cotton's leader, the Fuhrer, Mitch McConnell, doesn't support you the way that Democrat leaders supported John Tester. This is just one of many, many reasons that Maryland Matt won't come within a country mile of the Senate. Boy, did this guy pull a 180 worse than Jim Jordan or what? He represents the state of Arkansas, a state with a massive opiate epidemic issue, a state that increasingly is getting flooded with more and more illegals that he has not stopped from pouring across the border, a state that is being crippled by inflation while he sends unlimited amounts of money to Ukraine, a state that delivers the lives of young boys to the U.S. military to be abused and sacrificed on an annual basis at a higher rate than most high population states like Maryland or higher population densities. New Jersey. A lot of contractors live in New Jersey too. Do they send their sons and daughters to go fight the wars that Tom Cotton starts and funds? Nope. They sit in their home movie theaters, right, Laura? You've seen it. You've seen it. And listen, people, I know some people, obviously know a lot of people actually in the military industrial complex. They love people like Tom Cotton. Are these people worthy of that kind of lifestyle? I don't know. That's for God to decide, but they're not exactly model citizens. Decadence, Owen, a whole new meaning, bro. Avarice, excess. Not for the people in his state, though. Oh, no. No, sir. What do we have for Tom Cotton's constituencies? Tell them, June. We have a lifetime supply of opiates. That's right. A lifetime supply of misery and addiction. That's your consolation prize. And of course, the obvious course of action is to elect members of a party who represent the constituents. But you can't. Not everywhere. Because they rig the primary. And then they take the rigging of the primary as an affirmation that the voters really support them. Let's take Mike Guest in Mississippi 3. Their inclination was to oust Mike Guest for Mike Cassidy, who had a better resume, actually served, knew the value of obviously protecting the military, but not abusing it and overusing it. So he forces Guest into a runoff. Millions of dollars in a tiny population center, which is going to have super low turnout, to turn Mike Cassidy into basically the boogeyman. Come on, folks. Come on. And they still just don't want to listen. There's a great clip. I'm going to stop and go. And then we're going to have to take a break after this clip. But I'm going to stop and comment as we go. Because I thought that our good friend over at Fox News, Brian Kilmeade, did a great job demonstrating this mentality for us. I'm going to ignore that this was a historic event, and I'm just going to blame everybody else. When exactly is the moment, folks? Before you get to this, because you're going to talk about the debt, and Burchett's going to say $33 trillion, Brian. $33 trillion. Does the leader not have a responsibility for that? We all do, but he's the leader. At what point are congressmen and women supposed to say, that's enough? Was it 33 trillion? Was it 25 trillion? Should we wait until it's 40 trillion? Until we act like adults? Until we stand up and fight and say, no more? We're destroying the lives of our children and our grandchildren. Because why? We're too cowardly? Because you want to be cool, Brian? Because you want to go to tea and crumpets on frickin' Fridays with the rest of you idiots who don't see the condition of the rest of your countrymen and women are living in? Some of them squalor. Most of them week to week. What's going to happen with them when that debt bomb goes off, Brian? So again, I get what everybody's saying. There's no plan B. What's the end game? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Take responsibility for how you ended up here to begin with.
They have thrown Kevin McCarthy overboard. Our next guest is one of those GOP members who voted to oust Kevin McCarthy. Congressman Tim Burchett joins us now. Congressman, you were one of the 8. So Speaker McCarthy had 96% approval rating, but that wasn't good enough for you. Do you feel good about your...
Stop. Speaker McCarthy did not have a 96% approval rating. He had a 96% DC Republican Conference approval rating. For him to say that like that, it would definitely give the voters some impression that Kevin McCarthy was well-liked by the party. Kevin McCarthy's own approval rating is in the 30s in his own district. I know. I polled it. Laura, ask David if we could release that poll. cut.
Vote.
Well, I don't know about 96%.
Well,
I
they
think you
voted
need to
for him.
ask the people. Well, I don't work for the people in Congress. I work for the people of the 2nd District of Tennessee. And overwhelmingly, the folks are tired of the fact that we take in $5 trillion and we spend $7 trillion, that your leadership continues to pass these continuation resolutions. They push us right up against a holiday. Well, guess what? The 45-day one is pushed right up against it. We took off 6 weeks this summer from August to, we usually just take off August, but they decided to take over 2 more weeks. And I feel like that's a failure of leadership. They're the ones who set the schedule.
So
he's the speaker.
right.
Ultimately, the buck stops somewhere, and diverting the attention somewhere else, I think, is just wrong.
So you realize this is the first time in history that this has been done. So you're upset about 6 weeks in the summer. Did you call him during the summer and say, can we get back to work?
I'm also upset at the fact we're $33 trillion in debt.
Is that
and
Kevin
the value
McCarthy's
of the dollar.
fault?
It could be. He needs to
Whose
accept
fault
some
is it, jackass?
responsibility.
Didn't he have an 8% cut offered over that in that continuing resolution bill?
In the rate of growth.
In the rate of growth. Time in the rate of growth. That isn't a cut. That is slowing down the madness by 8%. I'm so sick of how they speak. And that's, you want to obscure what baselining is and everything. We should have immediately gone back to pre-COVID spending levels. We should have reversed the baseline.
Looking at the 33 trillion, and that's really just peanuts compared to the 33 trillion that we've run up. You know, we continue. If you look at the bills that we did pass, the appropriations, the one that had the cut was the agriculture bill, and it didn't pass because the Republicans sided with Democrats. But yet the defense bill, which had, wait a minute. The defense bill that had $30 billion new dollars in the Pentagon, which has never passed an audit, which has lost at one time 60% of their assets. We reward them with $30 billion more dollars so the war pimps at the Pentagon can spread more war around.
Look at him left. Why? Because he said war pimps. How many wars has Brian Kilmeade volunteered to fight? 0. Every time we're going to make some fake cut, and then we're going to give more to the military-industrial complex, who are currently spying on Americans, developing ways to herd you like cattle. They can't fight a kinetic conventional war to save their life. These are the same idiots who thought it would be a great idea to use blitzkrieg for a counteroffensive with the Ukrainians to attack a superior force in an unfair fight with a tactic that only works if you have a superior force and you are in the unfair fight, but it is to your advantage. They are war pimps. And when there's not wars, they make enemies at home. That's what they did all through the 90s. Damn. Bush wouldn't let us go in past Kuwait. So let's go murder a Green Beret at Ruby Ridge. Let's go start some conflict. And I got a great idea. Let's burn 80 women and children to death at Wake Up and tout some separatist militia problem we have.
So because he didn't audit the Pentagon and get every appropriation bill done, you're going to make history by ousting him to move your agenda forward. Here's what Kevin McCarthy said about you.
I personally like Tim Burchett, and I called Tim Burchett because I read his quote. And Tim Burchett's a friend of mine, which I'm kind of shocked by this. And Tim Burchett, in his quote, said he's leaning towards no, he's on CNN, but I'm going to pray about it. So I pick up the phone and call him because I didn't think he was already there. I said, Tim, I read your quote. You said you're going to pray about it. I wanted to talk to you about it. And somehow he construes that I'm a Christian. I'm not going to offend somebody. I simply read his quote back. I thought there was still an opening, and I wanted to talk to him about it. He never.
Wait, let me just say that, that's one version of the story. Who knows what the real version is? But the other version is this, that he basically said, what, you're going to pray about it? You need God's permission to support your friend. Basically that's the other side of this. So, who knows? Only a fly in the room would know for sure. But Tim Burchett has been his friend for years. And if you listen to, I chose to run this clip instead of the other one, but if you listen to Tim Burchett's clip, he posted to Twitter explaining himself and why he decided to get there. he basically said, you know, it was a decision between my friend and my conscience. And there's just been too many broken promises and there's been too many failures. And the people of the 2nd Congressional District expect more from me. They expect more from him. And ultimately, I got to hold somebody accountable for this. You know, I mean, to dismiss, even if that other version isn't exactly how it went, you could see and hear in his voice, just like Killamede, they have the same mentality. They're just so damn dismissive of anyone who dares to object to this insane, never-ending cycle. It's a never-ending cycle of insanity. When exactly is the opportune time to step forward and say enough? Because Republicans had control in 2017. Donald Trump did not want to sign that omnibus bill. Paul Ryan would not let him go back. He would not let his members go back to the drawing board like the president wanted him to do. Ultimately, this man right here, this guy, and Paul Ryan told the president, just sign it so we don't get killed in the midterms. When we come back before the elections, we're going to fully fund that wall for you. We're going to take the money out of defense appropriations and we're going to put it into that wall. That's the deal they made with Donald Trump. Guess what they did, folks? Renege. And he had to get the Office of Management and Budget to figure out how to redirect some money to continue to build the rest of what the plan was for that year. They lied to Trump. So all of these people who say, I just can't deal with the lying anymore. I can't deal with the lying. He mocks, Killamede mocks, all his apologists mock. They, it's just them being grandstanders. I have seen it with my own eyes. I've seen it happen. He lies a lot. Should have had J.R. Majewski on. Send him an invite. JR, if you're listening, you can come on right now and tell your story. This guy lies.
Never mentioned anything when we were communicating like that.
So you said part of the reason you voted like that is because you felt he was mocking you, correct? So it's personal.
Yeah, and that's not accurate. And that's any of that. I asked him about the 6 weeks off. I asked him about why we didn't have a term limits bill up, and continued on down the line. And it was always not his fault. You know, leadership has responsibilities. The buck stops somewhere. And in the House of Representatives, it stops and starts at the Speaker's office. And clearly that's not happening. And clearly, you don't want to continue to make excuses for him. But the truth is his approval rating around the country was not very high. And I don't represent the people of Congress.
Right,
I represent the people in Tennessee.
I got it. What do you think is going to do for the Republican Party and chances of holding on to leadership in the majority when it looks like you're the ringleader of a circus led by Matt Gaetz, who likes to blow things up but not offer any new ideas? Are you happy following Matt Gaetz? Is that your leader?
I'm not following Matt Gaetz. I made my own decision. I didn't ask Matt.
But if Matt Gaetz didn't challenge, you weren't going to challenge.
Do what?
If Matt Gaetz didn't stand up, you weren't going to challenge. You know that.
I believe I would have.
Oh, come on. Please. You were praying about it 1 minute. The next minute, you're going to lead an insurgency?
So you don't think that praying about it's important? Is that what you're saying?
One minute you're praying about how you're going to vote with Matt Gaetz. And the next minute you're going to lead an insurgency?
Listen, you got a predetermined answer to everything.
I mean, really, I don't even know what Tim's doing on his show, right? I let that go a little longer. I was going to interrupt, but I let that go a little bit longer. Obviously he's got his own thing about it. I do see what Killamede's trying to say, but Burchett's been on War Room for weeks. Way before Matt Gaetz started this motion to vacate. He's been for people who watch War Room, Tim has been on there for weeks. And by the way, one of the issues Tim has had is that McCarthy just won't give them the power to do the things that they say are priorities to them. They want, in Burchett's case, a lot of, and not just him, others, Mace as well. They were told they would be able to be a little bit more forceful and aggressive when it came to oversight on the UAP, UFO issue. Never happened. Never happened. He let the deep state retreat back into their web of lies and deception and the darkness of secrecy. He let them do that when Burchett and others thought that they had an opportunity. He doesn't want to give $30 billion to defense because he doesn't want to reward people like that with more money. It seems to me that people who understand that the role of Congress is not to play in the mud with the K Street lobbyists and, everybody else, the role of Congress is oversight. and spending. Create laws, conduct oversight. With the House, you have the power of the purse. If you're not willing to pull the strings, why the hell would anybody ever give you a majority? Why? Again, folks, I just want to say before I continue playing this clip, the bottom line is here, you're never going to affect real change. You're never going to stop these people from lying to you every 2 years when they need your money and your votes if you just keep up with the same. Well, what's the end game here, Rich? You know what? I could throw that right back at you. I agree. This should have, maybe Matt Gaetz does have an end game and he's just keeping some of it tight to the vest. But I submit, I could ask that question of them as well. What the hell's the end game here with you? 40 trillion? 50 trillion? World War III with Russia? What's the end game? Never going to stop the political weaponization of law enforcement? Here's another irony for Kevin McCarthy. Perhaps, had he kept his promise to Donald Trump and the American public and did more to stop the political weaponization of the Justice Department, Donald Trump would not have been so damn preoccupied with court, a kangaroo court yesterday, and maybe would have had the time and a little bit more willingness to come to Kevin's aid. But he didn't. He didn't. Maybe the man decided that Jim Jordan would be more effective. Oh, that's so you're saying Trump, yeah, the man wants to defend himself. The man wants to defend. He fell off the Forbes list of richest men in the world yesterday. Do you guys know that? Why? Because Forbes thinks that the government is going to wind up dissolving a lot of Donald Trump's wealth. Do you read it? This is a man who didn't even take a paycheck while he was the president of the United States, and this is how he's being repaid for it. So you would fault him for making the oversight of a corrupt Justice Department a priority? You better not. Because the minute they get done with Trump, the rest of us are next. Again, we were talking about that on Timcast. I don't think Cernovich is being hyperbolic. I think Scott Adams was being a little bit hyperbolic. But, obviously he's still alive. It's 3 years later. He said, if Biden's elected, I'll be dead in a year. But Cernovich, no. No way. If you're a ground level person, you don't follow along, they'll just let the cartels execute you in the street. They'll let the madman criminals that they've been letting out of prison stab you in the jugular like they did to the Democratic activists in the streets of New York the other day. They'll just watch you bleed out. They won't care and then won't put that person in prison. If you are somebody of influence and you're a problem for them, yeah, they'll fabricate something like a Russia hoax, or they'll make up some kind of ridiculous thing to charge you with, or hell, they may even charge you for an event that happened even if you weren't even there, like the leader of the Proud Boys, for instance, wasn't even there. When is the opportune time to say enough is enough with all of this going on?
I have an opinion about what's going on. Do you have an opinion?
Clearly.
Too?
And you talk over me every time I try to make a
point. All right,
point.
make your point.
The point is that we're $33 trillion in debt. This speaker was woefully lacking in leadership skills. He always placed the blame somewhere else. America is going to be better off with new leadership. And that's the bottom line.
And who is it?
It possibly could be Steve Scalise. It could be Elise Stefanik. It could be Roger Williams out of Texas. It could be Mark Green out of Tennessee.
So Steve Scalise is not a good idea. I'm just going to tell you right now. And for those of you, let me just say this, and I know it's not a popular thing to say, or at least maybe not to my viewers, but it isn't in the world of DC. Let me just put it this way very, very, very clearly. This is a man who, along with 4 others, was shot and targeted by a nutcase that his so-called friends across the aisle created in order to take out Donald Trump. They had that man convinced that Donald Trump was a Russian agent controlled by Vladimir Putin, and that people like Steve Scalise and others were his enablers, and that there was no way to do anything about Donald Trump until we dealt with his enablers in Congress. So crackpot, created by the corporate media and his friends across the aisle, gets in a van, loads up his guns, and shoots Steve Scalise. He almost dies 3 others do. And what does he do about it? Nothing. Folks, nothing. You think that's a very good idea for Speaker of the House? Or are we going to end up 6 months later right back where we are? I do think Stefanik is worth a look. I do. I'll tell you. I just, I'm not going to, I don't want to do privileged things here, but I'll tell you, Stefanik's much more MAGA than Kevin ever was. It's not even close. It's not even close. She is. She made some bad choices in her endorsements in order to play ball. She wanted to be a team player with Kevin. And we're going to read some articles from, we're going to read an article particularly on Politico, which will give you a kind of an idea about Kevin's role. That I'm not fabricating this. We're not making this up. Kevin's role and how he was the kingmaker. If you wanted your candidate to get help, or then you had to support somebody Kevin was supporting, or else if you're Elise Stefanik and you're supporting somebody else in New York, you're not going to get the money if you don't come out and endorse John Duarte, who you know is a dirtbag. That was Kevin. That came from the top, and she had to follow it. But she herself, much more MAGA, folks. She is. She's like New York MAGA. Or she's getting there anyway. Jim Jordan, I don't know. I'm not sure he is down for that. Plus, there are too many stories. I'm sorry. Right or wrong, true or false, there are too many stories that will bog down Jim Jordan with constant attack ads about his time as a wrestling coach, excuse me. I just don't think that's a great idea either. All right, let's get this wrapped up. We got somebody coming up.
They all supported Kevin McCarthy, including the most conservative guy I know, Jim Jordan. Why are you smarter than Jim Jordan and the 210 plus Republicans? Why are you smarter?
I represent my district, brother. And why are you smarter than me? You're
Clapping from the other room erupts. Right. Who the hell do you think you are, Brian Killamine? Who the hell do you think you are? Jim Jordan, smarter than Jim Jordan? Are you smarter than Jim Jordan? Well, for one thing, Burchett's 2nd Congressional District wasn't being written off the map before Kevin McCarthy saved him. What a prick.
You're condemning me because I stand up on my own, and that's
I'm not
what
condemning you. I'm questioning you. You don't like being questioned?
The line of questioning is very negative, and you know that, and I know that. When this is all over with, and we have a new speaker and we're running smooth, let's have this conversation again.
Were you happy with John Boehner?
I wasn't here with John Boehner.
Right.
You stupid idiot.
They're both rhinos. I mean, they're not in my camp anyway. So I wasn't here when they were here.
So you had 15 yeses for every round you voted for Kevin McCarthy, but you think he's the problem?
Right now, I sure do.
What? Can we just stop for a sec? Exactly, dummy. He gave, right, Laura, right. Exactly, you stupid tool, Murdoch tool. He gave him his support with conditions. He voted for him, which means he gave him a chance. That's like telling every Obama voter in the Rust Belt that, is there something wrong with you? That after you voted for Obama, you went and voted for Trump? What's wrong with you? It's called giving people a chance, and when they let you down, you change your mind. Whether they're friend or foe, right? What a stupid tool. I'm done. Hey, Kevin, I'm done with this. We got to get to a commercial anyway and then bring somebody on. Kevin's going to, Brian, he's going to go look for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq that he cheered for that never materialized. Go back to that, Brian. Come back when you find them, okay? I heard they snuck through the Syrian border. Maybe you can go there and go check them out. Oh, you friggin' putz. What a putz. I'm sorry. I just can't even deal with these people anymore, Laura. They don't really deserve any respect. This is a guy who sat and did nothing. Well, 10 trillion, 15 trillion, 20 trillion, 25 trillion, 30 trillion. He's been sitting his ass on that couch all those years. What have you done? Nothing, Brian. Nothing. Kiss Murdoch's ass. That's what you've done. Let's take a quick commercial break. Listen, our leaders are totally incompetent, and then there's the weather factor. It's all, I mean, that's just the bottom line. That's why even for me, natural gas isn't enough. You need a solar generator. I got one. I got both. You should too. Go to 4patriots.com. Use the promo code TPP10 right now at checkout to get yourself the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. This thing is portable, but it's stackable, so it's powerful enough to power your phones, medical devices for you and your loved ones, even your refrigerator and other appliances. Go to 4patriots.com. Use the promo code TPP10 at checkout. Don't forget, this code is for your first purchase only. It will work on anything, but make it count. They have great new deals right now, bundled up, and you can stack it with this code. So you'll save yourself hundreds of dollars, folks. Hundreds of dollars. Take advantage of it. One more time, 4patriots.com. Use the promo code TPP10. The People's Pundit, 10% off. Pretty simple, pretty standard. All right, I want to bring somebody on. I just hit him up last minute and said, you got to come on and talk, because he goes to Twitter and he puts up this voicemail. Okay? Because this is textbook Kevin McCarthy. This is what he does. But before we bring the voicemail on, I want him to come on and tell the story. It's the first time he's ever come back on, and what appropriate timing, by the way. Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Majewski. He ran in Ohio 9th Congressional District against Marcy Kaptur. He won a primary against Teresa. I'm always butchering her last name, and it's Italian, so I don't want to do it, but because I'm Italian. But he beat her. She was the establishment favorite. Welcome to the show, JR. Thanks for coming
Rich. Glad to be here, man.
Yeah, man, it's great to have you. And so much, last minute, I really appreciate it. I just thought
anything for you, brother.
I appreciate that, man. I just thought that this really, you were a perfect guest for this, because the reaction, and actually before we get to that, what is your reaction? And I can imagine, but what is your reaction to the ousting of Kevin McCarthy? And what would you say to the people, who say, well, what's the game plan now? We don't have a game plan. Basically get you to react to it.
I've been texting back and forth with Matt Gaetz all week, telling him that, history is going to be on his side, that, he's one of the few people with the fortitude to stand up for what's right. I mean, we have a leaking wound called the United States of America's Congress. And, it's a wound that needs stitches, and we've been applying Band-Aids for years. And, it hurts to rip the Band-Aid off, but eventually you have to cauterize and stitch that wound. And, thank God for Matt Gaetz having the balls to stand up and do this. And, for those that are out there screaming about this is going to cause chaos, I mean, Congress is chaos. Kevin McCarthy's manipulated elections. He's manipulated other people's lives. And, there probably were many people that would have stood up to Kevin McCarthy yesterday if they didn't fear the terabytes of blackmail that he probably has on them. And, I think this is great. And I'm sorry that it had to happen this way, but, this is God's work, man. Kevin McCarthy deserves it. And, I hope he understands, and I hope he reflects on some of the things that he's done over the years to people like myself.
That's really what I want to get into next too. I think it's important that everyone understand, this is not an ideologue. This is somebody who had ambition, lied to people a lot, betrayed people. Few know better than you that Kevin is a guy who can smile right to your face and pretend to be your friend and then screw you over. I mean, I have seen him, JR, flatly tell people, candidates, I am not going to interfere in this primary. I'm going to stay out of it. Let the best man win. And then within days, you see the filing from the Congressional Leadership Fund, and then he's dropping ads attacking, the guy he just smiled to and said, yeah, you're great. If you're in Congress, we'll be lucky to have you. Next thing you know, they're getting smeared by his leadership fund on air or in mailers, 13, 14 mailers after Mike Cassidy in a few-week period. David Giglio, there's no doubt what happened to you. They knew the game there. They knew you would never be able to clear that up in time. And for people who don't know, I really do want you to go through that. And I also want you to explain, you were not, even though you were MAGA, you were America First. You made no bones about it. You were pro-Trump. You had the president's support. But you were not anti-McCarthy. You met with him, you talked with him, you hosted him, you showed him a great time. You showed him all around the district. And then, I'm not going to give it away. I'll let you tell the story, but he's just this kind of person.
Yeah.
And go ahead. Why don't I let you just take it
So,
away?
I mean, I won a highly contested primary. I beat a state senator and a state rep.
Yep.
And nobody expected me to win except for probably myself and the people that follow me. And, I have a solid reputation here in Northwest Ohio. I think that when you look at me and you look at the people across the district, I'm a true representation of what Northwest Ohio is. I'm a guy that grew up in hard times and grew up in a hard neighborhood, and the worst neighborhood in the district. And
Yep.
I really put my my skills to work and joined the military after the military, finished a master's degree, and then went on to work in nuclear power. And I started out in the union, and then I rose up to the ranks of leadership. And no one's ever given me anything. So working really hard in the primary was not a challenge. But again, I wasn't expected to win. And so after winning, I got courted by the NRCC, and they slow walked me into some of their fundraising apparatus, such as the Young Guns program, et cetera, et cetera. And they basically wanted to handicap me to the point where I would be codependent on them as far as raising money and being able to effectively message. And so going into September, Marcy Kaptur, who was my opponent, had spent millions of dollars attacking me. She had Nancy Pelosi's super PAC, multiple other super PACs. The Democratic Party was feeding her campaign coffers. J.B. Pritzker's little group was funding her, and despite that, she had barely moved the needle. We were neck and neck, and I know you know this. You've been one of the biggest voices for this, but we were neck and neck going into October, and I remember sitting on the phone on a conference call with Fabrizio Lee and them saying, I can't believe the Kaptur campaign is still tossing money into this person. If we have never seen someone throw millions of dollars towards a candidate and not move the needle. And then they said, they have to have something. Is your background clean? I said, well, absolutely. I've been a nuclear power guy for 20 years. They pull my hair for drugs every few months. I have an active FBI clearance, of course my background's clean. And so going into late September, there was an AP piece that came out accusing me of lying about my military record and stolen valor, and
Which they held.
What's that?
They held, JR. We have to say it's like how coordinated the media can be.
Yeah.
They held that piece. They held it until when?
Until military ballots came out.
Exactly. Exactly.
So post-election congressional investigation by Matt Gaetz, Anna Paulina Luna, and a few others determined that the DCCC paid an opposition research firm who dumped a couple $100,000 to basically pull dirt on people, and they were able to illegally obtain my entire military record, and they had that forwarded to the AP. Now, the thing is, and I've always said this,
no doubt a bribe, by the way. No doubt.
What's that?
No doubt with a bribe, JR.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
No doubt.
I mean, there was a mission, and that mission was to ruin myself and other candidates that were going to surprise people. And so what it boils down to is I didn't have a couple medals. My records were terribly administered, and I spent the better part of the past year working through the administrative process to have the Air Force update my records, and they finally have, and they've awarded me all of the the Global War on Terrorism Expeditionary Medal. I've proven to them I'm a combat veteran by definition, and those are the things that they used against me to smear me. And once that story came out, Congressional Leadership Fund and NRCC basically pulled all of the money that they had allocated to my campaign out. And they had spent months prior to that trying to invade my campaign team and basically make us reliant upon them financially. And they were pretty successful. And so when they pulled that money, we had everything we needed for a ground game because that was my responsibility. But they took away money for media and TV and radio, all that stuff that we had been, highly reliant upon. And Kevin McCarthy was, I think, very concerned after, the day of the election. And like you said, he actually left me a voicemail because I think they believed that there was still the chance that I could have won. And he wanted to congratulate me and try to win accolades with me in the case that I did win because obviously he wanted my loyalty. But one of the things that I would not do is commit my vote for him or anyone for positions of leadership in the Republican Party. And I think that's part of the reason that they were upset. And the other thing is, we found that prior to the money being pulled from my campaign, he had struck a deal with Marcy Kaptur that she would effectively vote for him for
Yep.
Speaker of the House in the case that he needed her vote. And that's been captured. I believe it was the 11th round of his speakership, first speakership challenge. Marcy actually was the only Democrat to step up and say that she's considering crossing the aisle and voting for Kevin.
This is this is something that we caught him doing as well. Here's Kevin McCarthy with Democratic Representative Jim Costa. You have him here with David Valadao, who voted to impeach Donald Trump. And for Jim Costa, when they redistricted, basically one of his lackeys, Adam Gray, who was a state legislator, took over. It was, I wouldn't call him a mentee, but an acolyte. And they had these kinds of same deals. So that wasn't good enough because they were afraid the MAGA Republican was going to beat him anyway. So they recruited literally a donor to run, which they then dumped millions of dollars into. And the deal was, if Duarte didn't win, then it wouldn't matter because Adam Gray would vote for him as well. So that was always the rumor there, JR. It's not even a rumor. I mean, it was a rumor at first, and then that happened. So this is all because Kevin didn't feel comfortable enough. Again, that particular candidate never said he would not support McCarthy, but he did say, I'm going to need some things. I'm going to need to be assured that you're taking the country, you're going to take the House in the direction that we would be elected to take it in. We're not going to play the same game. In your race, I just want to say, before they dumped that on you, it was low single digits. And it was absolutely a winnable race. People don't know Trump won that district. Even when it was redrawn, it was still a Trump plus district. So they just abandoned you because they felt that they couldn't trust you to be on Kevin's side. He thought that he could sacrifice people like you and people like Joe Kent. They did it to John Gibbs. This is something I want to ask you about next. They thought that they could sacrifice people that they weren't really sure of because they believed that they were going to get 240 plus, if everybody had won. So, they're going to win Connecticut 5. They're going to win Rhode Island 2. I mean, this insane stuff, so they could really afford to abandon you guys. And that's what he did. So
Right.
Just so everybody understands.
And they immediately, right after the election, they immediately switched to say that, they started the narrative that the reason why MAGA candidates lost was because of Donald Trump. I mean, they immediately shifted the blame, and it was just a total farce. I mean, that's the propaganda campaign that they were putting out, and luckily we got ahead of it. I mean, it lasted a couple days, but people like yourself and others, we're out there showing the polling, showing the postmortem, and explaining that Donald Trump had nothing to do with these losses. It was leadership.
Not at all. It was leadership, their lack of support. One of the big data point I always point to with this is that, Republicans won 90+% of the vote that strongly disapproved of Biden. They ended up losing the somewhat disapproved vote, which is across the board. It's not just MAGA candidates. It's his Alan Fung in Rhode Island. It's his Connecticut 5 candidate. It's his Virginia 2 candidate, Virginia 7 candidate. So everybody lost that. And they did because I don't know if some of this with John Gibbs, I totally believe some of it was intentional. And so this is what they'll do. And JR just told you guys some of what happens when you unexpectedly win a primary. Somebody like Kevin, and after we're done with JR, I'm going to read you something about how shambles some of these people are in because he was a prolific fundraiser. And he would basically come in and say, your team did a good job, good for them, but I'm going to turn off the spigots, if you want the spigot to stay on, you're going to have to use my people. So in the case of John Gibbs, his inner circle was hollowed out, and I never blamed him for it. You just don't. It's business. You move on and wish him luck. But then they, I don't have to say who it is. People can go look it up. But joint, polling conducted with with Kevin's groups and the NRCC, and they gave him bad advice, JR. And I'm wondering if they gave you similar bad advice because other people got different advice and acted a lot differently than some of the MAGA candidates who were in the position you guys were in. He told John Gibbs, don't answer the abortion stuff. Just be quiet about it and generically talk about abortion. And as John is passing me Kevin's pollster's polling, he's telling me, my unfavorables are going up, Rich, quick. What is going on? And it was clear, JR, they told him to shut up on the abortion issue. They told him not to talk about the election stuff. And he just got painted with this brush, this extremist brush, much like they tried to do with you, only they did a hit job on you as well.
Right.
Did they tell you the same stuff, basically? Like, don't react on abortion?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I didn't listen, right? And that's one of the reasons why they didn't like me. I mean, I'll say this.
That's why the hippies came. That's why you got the hippies.
Absolutely. I mean,
seriously. Yeah.
To me, resonating with the people in this district, to me, is instinctive, right? I'm a populist by blood, right? I get it. And that's what's made me successful, is I understand what the people in my district want. And I relate to them. I can emphasize with them. And so when questions would come up, I mean, I'm fearless to answer questions. I might not always get it right, but I'm still going to answer the question. And I know enough, and I'm smart enough in my communication skills to articulate my point, but also to give the person bringing the concern the opportunity to share their feelings. And that made them mad. I mean, I remember going on the Loud Majority with Sean Farish, and the next day I was in DC and I got pulled into the office with McCarthy and him asking me why the hell I was going on Sean Farish. And I said, well, because he's a friend and he's got a big podium. But the reason he didn't want me on Sean Farish is because they slam him, right? It wasn't about me. It was about him and the optic. But, I wasn't going to listen to, the NRCC if they were giving me bad advice. And that bothered them. They wanted you to be Manchurian. They wanted you to stand in line, right? Yep. They wanted you to repeat messaging, and messaging in Washington D.C. doesn't resonate in the cornfields of Ohio, and I know better than that. So I resisted it, and I know John was in a pretty bad predicament, and so were other candidates. But I think it really just boils down to I mean, it's situational, case by case, and what you're willing to do as a candidate. And I'm just probably one of the most outspoken people that ran last cycle.
Yeah, and I think that's why you got the extra treatment, because there's no doubt these people all know when these stories are coming down the pike, when they react, they know when they're reacting like they did in your case, they know full well what's going on. Voters need to understand that. They know it's a hit piece. They don't, they've been through this a long time. This is not their first rodeo. They know what's happening, and they make the decision, the conscious, strategic, whatever decision. I'm not going to stick with this person. I'm going to abandon this person. And in the case of you and others, what they really got in their mind was a gift, an excuse that they could use to now abandon. But you're right. He was hedging his bets. And I want to play this for people because he was hedging his bets in case you did win. This is an area of the state where, if you poll Ohio statewide, the New York Times had Biden easily winning this area, not just your district, but an entire region. Then I believe they had like a Biden +1 or something. It was ridiculous. And of course, Trump easily won Ohio. When we polled it, we didn't, track your race, but when we polled the state of Ohio and asked about the congressional races, it was a few point race before that hit job. It was a 3-point race, basically, just under 3 points. Which is
I remember when. So I'll give you a couple of examples, right? I remember when President Trump held his first rally for JD Vance, and I got invited. I came down, and I didn't know this at the time, but President Trump, I believe, planned on endorsing me from the stage. This is before the primary, and one of my opponents at that time created this fake text message. It was totally photoshopped. Created this text message between myself and some other person, and basically where I'm saying that calling President Trump an idiot, which is totally not true, right? I would never do that. And so I got pulled into the tent before President Trump got on stage, and they showed me, this. It was actually a Twitter message. They showed it to me, and they're like, "What is this?" And I had never seen this before. So I unlocked my phone, and I gave my phone to Susie Wiles and a couple other people.
Susie. Yep.
And they looked through my tweets. They looked through my everything. And like, I had no contact with whoever this user was. Right. And so they knew it was a lie. And when President Trump called my name out on that stage, like, I had a louder applause than any other person that was there besides Trump and probably Jim Jordan, right? And I'm saying JD Vance, all of them. I mean, my name recognition in the state was already very, very high. And it wasn't like my race was a hard lift for these guys. It was very easy. If they would have spent 25% in my race, what they spent,
Absolutely.
let's say in Madison Jesse Otto's race or another race, I would have easily won. And the other thing is, it's like, I decided that I was going to run again this cycle, and I announced in April of this year, and then I had to drop out because my mother had to have open heart surgery, and I'm back in now. But
yeah, we're going to talk about that.
I was at Trump Bedminster for the screening of The Sound of Freedom. I was invited there, and 24 hours after I was seen at Bedminster with Trump, Kevin McCarthy and the entire GOP leadership team came out and endorsed the guy that I beat last cycle in the primary. And they did that because they were concerned that I was courting President Trump for his endorsement again, and was going to announce, when in reality, I was just attending the movie showing. And so they're continuing now, like, to work against me. I mean, it's terrible. I could show you some of the things offline, what they're doing. They are scared shitless of me.
You're going to have to come back on and talk more about this, because there are other things like the endorsements, the local endorsement stuff that I really want to talk to you about. Let's play Kevin's voicemail to you. Okay.
Right.
Let's play what Kevin is doing here. Is like no different than a Wall Street guy who makes an investment into something, right? But he's really got, I mean, for my investors and traders out there, he's really bought a couple option contracts predicting that investment is going to fall. But just in case, he's going to grab some calls too. He's going to straddle the fence. That's what Kevin's doing here. Okay. And I'm going to play this. This is textbook Kevin McCarthy, ladies and gentlemen. Textbook Kevin McCarthy. Are you ready?
JR, it's Kevin McCarthy. I was calling to wish you good luck, buddy. Fight through it. We're going to win. You're going to help me make history. Take care. Bye.
And I know Kevin wanted to be speaker really bad. I listened to his comments to the conference last night, and as heartfelt as you want to say they were. I wanted to be speaker, but I wanted to save the country more. It's like, JR, then what justifies all of your other actions? So
right.
You must really dislike your own voters and your own candidates, and you must at some level dislike them because you're not listening to them, because you're actively working against them. So you must think, like Brian Kilmeade, who was just interviewing Congressman Burchett, that you're smarter than everybody else in the room, and that you got something they don't. There's nothing else that explains it. It's just not. And now the California GOP is in total disarray, JR. And with Ohio, when it comes to you, there's going to be some second, or I would say that the anti-MAGA crowd is going to be weakened in primaries. They already got their butts kicked everywhere in 2022. But there's an article in Politico already about this, that without Kevin there interceding and doing what he does, then people like Rydell are going to have a problem. So I wanted to ask you about that. So normally these local parties, county parties, they don't endorse, right? Tell people what's going on in your case since you announced that you're going to run. By the way, it was Tim Cast when your video came out, and we were all everybody was laughing. It was right before Tim Cast aired, and we're listening to your announcement laughing because we're like, this is probably the first F-bomb in a video ever. It was great.
I'm trying to get on Tim's show, man. I wanted to talk to him about a couple things. I know he's a big nuke guy, so I want to talk to him about that. But yeah, look, they're doing the same thing they did to me last cycle, man. They're just they're more transparent about it. Or maybe I'm just a little bit smarter, right? And I'm catching them. But members of the Republican leadership from the counties are posting on their social media that they're going to do what they need to do to make sure the right candidate is nominated, and they're saying that that's not me. And despite the fact that I won the primary by a huge margin last cycle, and I wasn't known, right?
Yeah.
And so they're trying to intervene and persuade, and they're going to keep doing it. It's not going to stop, but they're so brash about it, like they don't care. They feel like there's no repercussions, and
I think it's a little bit of both, that they're more open and that you just see it more because I can tell, I saw it last time when you were running against, and it's Teresa Gavaroni, when you were running against her. Same thing goes for a lot of other MAGA candidates that ran. You really did try to play nice, and you did try to do this respectful. And that's the thing that really sticks in my craw. So if that's the way it's going to be, then the best man or woman, wins. And then you're supposed to come together and support each other. That is the way this is supposed to go. But the establishment doesn't do that. And they always, complain and moan about Trump voters don't vote for us. Well, why would they? And every time you don't get your way, you cry and take your ball and go home too. And last night was an embarrassment, not just I'm not talking about the votes to remove McCarthy. I'm talking about Republicans' reaction afterwards. They go and they tell the quote problem moderates, which to me, moderate means you don't really have any principles. You don't believe in anything. That's what moderate means to me. They tell these other Democrats that the moderates have been working with, we're all just going to quit en masse because you didn't save Kevin. Now they're doing these little vindictive things, throwing Pelosi out of the office. She should have been out of months ago anyway. Steny Hoyer's losing his cheese setup that he's had for years, so because they didn't save Kevin. And to me, it's just crazy, first, that they would ever think that they would. That's how delusional they are. And then secondly, it's what I have witnessed them doing to candidates for years, on a greater scale, I guess, JR, is what I'm trying to say. Joe Miller in 2010 got the treatment like you got. It was outrageous, actively attempting to sabotage him. By the way, you had polling on your own. It wasn't just me that showed this was a winnable race. All they had to do was do more, just a little bit more and help. And they didn't. I mean, it's just a fact. They didn't do it. Oh, by the way, you had, I believe it was Tony Fabrizio, right? You had polling
Fabrizio Lee. Yeah. I mean, like I said,
quality bolster.
There was a conference call, and Fabrizio Lee said, start spending money. They were showing the undecideds. They were saying JR's getting lambasted out here. You guys can save this election. It's easy. Just spend the money, and they wouldn't do it. And I think one of the things that we don't really focus on that we probably should is that there's another form of disease in Washington D.C., and that's the staffers. Right? These staffers are the ones that feed the ears and minds of our representatives. And you get a highfalutin little 25-year-old that just doesn't like you because of whatever. I mean, there's no resistance that keeps them from walking in specific circles and telling untruths about candidates because of their personal opinion. And to me, that's the cancer that we got to root out. I mean, we talk term limits. Let's term limit these staffers.
Look what Nancy Mace's staffer did to her last night. I mean, calling or not even before, before the vote, before he went out on his press conference. And then, of course, that staffer gave Kevin McCarthy fire, gave him ammunition to go out there and trash his own boss. I talked to the staffer, and the staffer basically thinks she's crazy. I'm okay. That's great. The staffer isn't elected. She is,
right.
So again, Nancy Mace, no bomb thrower, folks. So the idea that the staffer's telling you the truth and she's just making up these instances of Kevin McCarthy not keeping his promises, ludicrous to me. Ludicrous. JR, we got to have you back on to talk more about your actual race, though, too. Now in the present. We'd love to do that. But tell people where they can check you out, follow you on social, support you if they want to support you, the whole 9 yards.
On social, it's always JR Majewski. It's MAJEWSKI. And then my website is JRFOR Ohio. It's JR4Ohio.com.
Well, best of luck as always, my friend. And I'll invite you back. We'll have you back on real soon to talk more about this district. Fascinating district. We'll do a little analysis of it. I know people, we're going to do the Rust Belt poll soon, which is cool. So that'd be a great time. But you're welcome back. Thanks for coming on such short notice. Anytime, dude. JR Majewski, ladies and gentlemen, Ohio 9. And that possibly could change as well. I'm talking about the actual, we'll see. Ohio's kind of like in flux. We'll see what happens. It's possible actually it can get even redder. But yeah, this a totally disgusting example. I could do an entire show on all of the people who have stories like JR has. I could do an entire show. I don't have enough time. I honestly don't. I mean, if I gave them all 15 minutes to tell their stories, I'd need 3-4 shows. No joke. Here is, which one do I want to go for first? California Republicans having an absolute meltdown? Yeah, let's do that. Okay. Because I think this goes to what JR was talking about, how important Kevin McCarthy was when it came to fundraising. They're going to pitch this a different way, of course, and they're going to say this is a disaster for California Republicans. Without him, they're not going to survive. They were in trouble anyway. Like I've been telling all of you since 22 was up. David Valadao barely won. John Duarte won by 400 votes when the turnout was 50%. It's a majority Hispanic district, and vast majority, it was like 7, the electorate was 70% white. What do you think is going to happen when the non-white presidential turnout levels come out and vote down ballot? Do you think they're going to be able to hang on? Now they're going to blame, of course, Matt Gaetz for these districts being lost, because they likely will. And I'm telling you, I'd say this until I blow in the face. If somebody who can make inroads and win over new Hispanics, particularly Hispanic men in the Central Valley, does not defeat John Duarte in a primary, that seat is 95 to 98% likely to go to Democrats, and that would be Adam Gray. Although I'm not sure there's much of a difference. John has voted basically lockstep with Kevin McCarthy and with Democrats on everything. He hasn't cast a single hard vote. He voted against the trans stuff. He voted against border security. And we all know why. He wants cheap labor. He's textbook with that. You know, I mean, you don't walk around saying, don't worry, Hispanics are going to vote for me because they have to if they want a job. Like, that's insane. Insane. Why is Trump performing 10 points better among Hispanics, even in California, by the way, go look at the Emerson poll, than every other Republican? Is it because he's toxic? He's toxic to white people in Los Angeles, in Beverly Hills, and in some parts of Orange County. That's true. They spent every dime they had on that recall election, which he brought up, by the way, in his speech. Good for him. Every dime they had in Orange County and San Diego, they lost both counties. $14 million down the drain, wasted. Why? Because they didn't believe people like me who said the target for Republicans is no longer Orange County and San Diego. That will continue to drift away, probably. The target is the Central Valley. And of course, you keep your northern districts, you keep your more conservative districts. All right, so let's bring this up. Let me go all the way up to the original because it's important. All right, I'm sorry, I was already reading it. With McCarthy out, California Republicans lost a crucial lifeline. And I'm not going to read Matt Shoup. We're going to read him in the article, so we don't need to read the subheadline. Los Angeles. Just when it seemed like it couldn't get worse for the GOP in California, Representative Kevin McCarthy lost the speakership. McCarthy's defenestration in Washington leaves beleaguered House Republicans in his home state, whose seats he helped defend, preparing to spend the next 13 months without one of their biggest assets. And this is how they think, because they have not effectively evolved with the electorate in California. They have been the happy losers. It's the fault of Matt Gaetz now that California, once the home to Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan, governors, former governors, the Gold Coast, right? The Golden State, once one of the most Republican states in the country, ton of electoral votes. It will now be Matt Gaetz' fault that it has somehow been trending liberal for 35 years, 40 years. It's insane, but that's where they're going. He was a phenomenal fundraiser and phenomenal recruiter, Matt Shoup, a California Republican strategist, said of the Bakersfield native. Unless we get another Californian as speaker, I think we could all have something to be concerned about. He was a great recruiter, Laura. You're kidding me, right? Republican representatives Michael Steele, Young Kim, Mike Garcia, David Valadao, and John Duarte were already in vulnerable territory before Tuesday's dramatic unseating of McCarthy, led by Florida Representative Matt Gaetz and other hardline conservatives. That's funny because Chip Soy keeps saying they're not conservative. With the former speaker now stripped of his power, the fight to maintain a hold on their districts and, by extension, GOP controlling Congress got much more daunting. It was daunting already. I've been sounding the alarm for months. They got lucky. And I love Mike, but he was absolutely wrong when it came to this idea that California Republicans have been dealing with ballot harvesting for years, so they just got proficient in it. And Republicans should be doing it all over the country like California. They didn't do squat. Turnout was abysmal in California. That's why many of them won. Matt Gaetz and the other useful idiots have delivered a huge gift to Democrat Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, said Robert Stutzman, the top Republican operative in California, who has known McCarthy since his time in the State House in Sacramento. Yeah, that sounds like a real objective, impartial voice, doesn't it, Laura? California Republicans tried to keep the ship steady on Tuesday. Valadao, who eked out a 3 percentage point win over his Democratic rival for a Central Valley seat in 2022, which is only with 1-0 Politico, said he still feels good about his campaign. Really? Because without Kevin protecting you, David, the Trump voters may just exact their revenge. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, David Valadao was shielded from Trump's wrath and ire because he voted for impeachment. Why? Because he has, JR was just bringing this up, he has his assistant, who's also his consultant, who told him Trump is toxic in the Central Valley, and if you don't want to get crushed, you need to vote for impeachment. He didn't think impeachment was credible at all. He did it for political expediency, pure and simple. And Trump wanted to primary him and ruin him, but Kevin begged for Valadao's political life. He begged for it. And Trump said, all right, get off your knees. Others couldn't dismiss the potential impact on the balance of power. McCarthy said he will not run again for the speakership. Not surprising, since it took him 15 rounds of voting to win the first time. And actually, let me see if I can, I don't want to screw anything up here, but let me see if I can get some of his text. There is some text from McCarthy I was able to get. Let's see if I can get. He said, I got to be the 55th speaker. Those who stuck with me, blah, 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 blah. Okay, when we come out of the next vote, let's elect that person on the first round. If I have to be the sacrifice, then so be it. That is something he said to the conference last night. All right, so getting back to this. But it took him 15 rounds, and that's what he's talking about. It wasn't productive. Well, Kevin, if you knew it wasn't productive, why did you subject the legislative body to 15 rounds of voting and wrangling and ugly arm twisting and door deal making, behind closed doors deal making? Why did you subject the conference to that? If it's so toxic of a situation now, you wanted to be speaker. You have wanted to be speaker forever. You did not want to do what you had to do and you were forced to do in 2015. Step aside and let somebody who's a consensus candidate actually get it. Garcia, who attacked me on Twitter personally for pointing this out, for pointing out that they have won these elections on the skin of their teeth, and that, God forbid, when Hispanics actually show up to vote, which they are, they're like basically wearing the pajamas inside out every election year, dancing on the bed like kids do snow dances for snow days. That's what they're doing. Turning their jammies inside out, jumping on the bed, chanting to the gods, hoping that Hispanics don't vote. It's pathetic. Mike Garcia knows it's pathetic. He's one of the few who have been able to win some support with some groups. But again, turnout was very, very low. If it goes from 50%, to like 62%, and it's heavily non-white, he's in deep trouble. And he literally, personally, went to Twitter and attacked me for pointing it out. I don't know, Mike, maybe you didn't do your own math like you don't read your own bills. Maybe you didn't do your own math in school. This is not hard mathematics. This is simple, basic arithmetic. And once upon a time, he used to run a very different campaign. Even when it started with his first special election, he just ran different campaigns. Democratic consultants were jubilant that McCarthy's ouster could boost their candidates a half a dozen or so swing districts across California. But it's not the only reason they were jubilant. Listen to this. Orrin Evans, a Democratic consultant working on multiple swing races, said McCarthy tarnished GOP candidates on his way out the door by forcing them to vote on a stopgap spending bill with cuts to law enforcement and other key services. The bill failed, and McCarthy relied on Democratic votes to temporarily avert a shutdown, something he took issue with in his speech last night in his press conference. Not a speech, in his presser. He took issue with people criticizing him for making a deal with Democrats to keep the government open. Well, that's what you did. And then he says in his farewell speech behind closed doors, he said, the Democrats came to me to make a deal. I didn't. I wasn't going to make a deal. When a Republican leader works with the Democrats, it's not best for our conference. When 8 people work with the Democrats, it's not the best of our conference, not for the best of our conference. So it's okay when Kevin McCarthy's got to keep the government open to make a deal with Democrats. But it's wholly unacceptable for 8 Republicans to vote with Democrats to remove him as speaker. Again, folks, I am willing to stipulate that if there's no end game here, it's pretty stupid to just have disunity. I'm sorry, it is. But you can't even dare to make that claim if you don't also acknowledge that the core problem here is not Matt Gaetz grandstanding Mark Levin. It's that the party doesn't represent its voters, and it's an unsustainable political environment. Eventually, frustration is going to boil to the surface. And that's what happened here. The GOP is in full crisis mode. Every single one of these Republican enablers are going to have to own that parting gift from McCarthy from now to November 2024, Evans said. By the way, John Duarte literally crawling around on his hands and knees behind Kevin McCarthy since he's been in Congress since his first year. He's done everything Kevin has wanted him to do. Good job, John. They're salivating over that now. You walked into a buzzsaw for Kevin, and you're not going to, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to beg the most conservative of voters in California's 13th district to come bail you out when you went against the trans bill, when you continuously send money to Ukraine, when you talk bad about the man behind his back. I just don't see it. And you expect to win Hispanics why? Because you're open border? Hispanics in that district don't want an open border. They're tired of an open border. Exactly, Laura. I hate that stupid white Republicans think like this about Hispanics. Many of those people came legally. Yeah, right. Many of these people went through the right channel. If there's somebody working for John, that's more likely the case. It's just, it's insulting. They'd rather somebody just be hardline about it and say what they mean. That's why, I mean, a billionaire from Manhattan is just way ahead of them. And if you look why Trump is outperforming on the generic ballot, it's not just whites. It's non-whites. Statewide, the picture is even bleaker for Republicans. Right. And this has nothing to do with Matt Gaetz. You failed to run a competent party. You make deals with Democrats all the time. Jessica Patterson, who, by the way, wants to be RNC chair and is Kevin McCarthy's acolyte, now runs the California GOP and tried to screw Donald Trump out of 60 delegates when they tried to reform the rules for the primary Makes deals with them all the time. Super happy about them moving up the primary date. Why? Because her dream change to the primary rules would have given liberal Republicans in liberal districts an outsized advantage share of the delegates than, for instance, Republicans who live in Kevin McCarthy's Bakersfield district. There happen to be a lot more Republicans there, but they would have gotten the same number of votes as liberals in, the Bay Area districts. Because they're more concentrated in those liberal areas, they get more say out of delegate allegation than true red meat conservatives. So I mean, it's just so dishonest, Laura, when they make these claims. Like, oh, you don't make a deal with the Democrats. Look, those 8 voted with the Democrats. Maybe the real question is, why were there only 8 Republicans? Why were there only 8 Republicans? And I'm sorry, I could blow some people up right now, but I have had personal conversations with some of these people. I'm going to support McCarthy because I got these concessions. He promised me this. Those promises never happened, and yet they're still shilling. Where's the J6 footage? Had to go to Tucker Carlson? We're too stupid to see it? Look at the guidelines they imposed on anyone who wants to go and review them. You want to know how stringent they are? Just go look at Julie Kelly's timeline right now. You have to be literally somebody who is capable of dedicating a full... You're now not working. You're not doing anything. You're going to dedicate yourself to January 6th, and you're going to make it a full-time job because you only got a couple hours at a time to be in there. It's insane. They have a super minority in the Capitol in Sacramento. And by the way, why is that? Because they never fulfilled their border security promises. Had they, California would not be this blue anymore. Still, it wouldn't be anymore. It's really the better way to say it. It wouldn't. Had they fulfilled their promises, the working class in California would not have been hollowed out, forced to flee to other states, which is what is that's the deal in California. It's not just immigration, folks. Liberal policies have made cost of living go through the roof. And and by the way, I'm sorry, it can keep going on and on. Agriculture, water, gun policy, over and over and over and over. And that weak mindset from the California Republican Party infected the Republican conference in D.C. And while California Republicans are the largest of any state in the nation due to the sheer size of the population, they're also outnumbered nearly 2-1 by Democrats. We should do a voter analysis in California and put it up for locals. The grassroots GOP base has been wary of McCarthy given his establishment profile. Yet even some hard right activists gathered at a party convention in Anaheim last weekend were quick to defend him just days before his ouster. That's true. I trust him. He's experienced. He knows what he's doing to get everybody to the table. Paula Witzel, chair of the San Diego County Republican Party, told Politico Saturday after McCarthy passed a bill to avert a government shutdown. And that's it. It's already 2:06. We're going to have to end it there. So let me just say this with some parting words here. Allow me to give some parting words. If you like this video, give it a like, give it a Rumble Plus, wherever you are, give it a getter like, give it a getter heart, whatever it is. And of course, subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. Rumble users, sign up to the People's Pundit Rumble channel. YouTube users, sign up for the People's Pundit Rumble channel. Even if you're watching on Locals right now, live on Locals, we'd very much appreciate it if you would go ahead, like and share, like and subscribe on Rumble. Because Sean, as we were talking about this last night on his show, Battlegrounds, 100% right. I'm only going to bring on advertisers that Laura and I personally know and use, but it certainly helps. Metrics like that always help. So let me say this with parting words. Again, you cannot just focus on the chaos part of this. You cannot just focus on the what's the end game part of this. You cannot just focus on the 8 traitors sided with Democrats. That's all bullcrap. It's all bullcrap if you don't acknowledge that this was a collision. That the Republican Party, we know that they were on a collision course with this moment for a very long time. The historic vote to vacate the Speaker of the House of Representatives has been a road that Republicans have been walking for a long time. It was a long road to oust Kevin McCarthy. Longer even than his dream and aspiration to become the Speaker of the House. McCarthy, in some respects, he's a victim of, at the very least, a product of this untenable situation that I've been talking about. He thought perhaps things would not be different for him. Maybe he could get through a tenure without this moment happening. John Boehner did, till he was tossed. And Speaker Ryan until he was forced to give it up. I think I could last. I think I can outlast them. And I'll tell you right now, I will say this unashamed. If you are MAGA or you view yourself as more of a conservative Republican or somebody who just wants to put America first, Kevin McCarthy was a better speaker than Paul Ryan. He was. Kevin McCarthy was a better speaker than John Boehner. He was. He was more effective than both. He was unfortunate not to have as big of a majority that those two men had. And in several cases, like JR's and others, that was a demon of his own design. So his downfall in itself was a demon of his own design. Kevin McCarthy should have saw the handwriting on the wall when his friend Eric Cantor was bumped off by Dave Brad over immigration, but he didn't. He might have seen it and just wholly refused to read. He might have heard a voice like Paul Ryan, his other friend, claimed to have heard after Donald Trump was elected, but he refused to listen. He refused to acknowledge the signs. And now, like Paul Ryan before him, and Eric Cantor before him, and John Boehner, they're all gone. Kevin will still serve in the House, of course, but his influence will be greatly diminished. Greatly diminished. They need to learn this lesson. It's the same lesson, same parallels they refuse to learn when it comes to Donald Trump. You can consistently take the intellectually weak and feeble and easy way out and look back at 2022 and say, Donald Trump picked bad candidates. And I can guarantee you this, things will just keep getting worse for you. Or you can kick Frank Luntz out of the second bedroom on the left and give a damn about what the American people have tried to tell you. Frankly, it's outrageous that the speaker of the so-called America First Party, and it is now, our polling was the first to show it. For a while, Republicans started to identify less as America Firsters. Now we're back up to 2/3, 70%, which is exactly what, was it the New York Post poll? I can't remember. Monmouth, even. Everybody's following our trend now. So this is supposed to be the America First Party. And yet the leader in the lower house was friends with a slob of a man who fabricates focus groups and stuffs his pocket with money that Big Pharma pays him to convince the American people to put poison in their body. You understand what I'm saying here? I'm trying to give you examples. It is an untenable situation. You either represent the voters that you beg every 2, 4, and 6 years for their votes, for their money, for their support. You either represent them or you will go the way of the dodo. Like Eric Cantor and John Boehner and Paul Ryan and now Kevin McCarthy. Republican Party better ask themselves whether they want to end up like the Whigs, because something else will emerge out of it. I actually am more and more believing more solidly that this is their last chance. This election, the 2024 election, is their last chance, because for their voters, it's their last chance not to be persecuted. It's their last chance not to have their children persecuted, their grandchildren persecuted. It's their last chance to have free speech, to be able to say and believe the things they want, to obey their conscience. And if they are failed by an incompetent, bogus party, they will find another vehicle to affect the change that they want to see happen, if they're not all thrown in the gulags by then. And that's where it is. So we are now at this tragic, historic moment because of the refusal to listen to the voice they claim to hear. All right. Don't forget to sign up on Locals. Of course, I'm going to give you guys a little tip about where we're at on the public polling project. I am going to get that national one going. I really wanted to talk more about it today. Locals, I mean, it's going to be a very, very, very quick process. Once I get it done, it's out. Francis Suarez, stupid little things. He had to be removed from both questionnaires. All the different versions, by the way, not just the state and the national ones. But we're going to have RFK on there. We're going to have Gavin Newsom on there. This is about the presidential impact of different candidates. All right. Cornel West will be on there. We're going to ask. I may not ask about Ron DeSantis anymore. Okay. It is not clear that he is really a second place candidate. It's unfair to the Nikki Haley's and the Vivek Ramaswamy's. I think we all know that Donald Trump is the runaway front runner and damn near inevitable nominee. I mean, that's just, if what else is going to happen that's going to pull his support away. So I think we'll wind up debating that in a bit. But all right, with that in mind, again, peoplespundit.locals.com. Keep your eye to it, and we'll get that questionnaire done today and hopefully get in the field. All right. So there we have it. Nothing but love for all of you, and we will see you Friday. Don't miss it. Noon Eastern Standard Time. Inside the Number. Exactly. Ron who? Jonathan. I mean, that's where we're at. Deuces.